Well, it is Thursday evening, about 9:18 p.m. I'm Chief Meteorologist Matt Lawpon as we are tracking a potential for active and severe weather Saturday. Thinking is that some thunderstorms could produce severe weather, including tornadoes. Typically, we would start these a little bit later, like maybe Friday, the day before. The thinking, though, is that this is going to be late enough in the evening. We need to be kind of planning ahead on what we're doing for Saturday night. Because this likely will be after dark, and that always makes people a little more vulnerable. And the thing I hate the most is when people are like, "It's my time, it's my time." That's not the reality in this. We need to plan ahead so that that is not a situation we find ourselves in. Let's start off with the general overall risk area as it stands for your Saturday. As you can see, all locations in WTVA 9 News viewing area in a risk area, certainly for locations around the Golden Triangle, back toward Greenwood and Vicksburg. There's a slight, and we look at the overall odds of severe weather on this. That's clearly the bullseye on this. Original graphic here. If confidence were to continue to increase, it's possible we could be dealing with a higher risk level at some point. But the thing is that this risk level you see in the corner comes back to the quantity of reports. And so the more likely are we to see a greater number of reports, that's where that comes in. That doesn't necessarily speak to the severity of the overall reports. We kind of let that, come in. And so I want to point to this on the severity part. And you can see in the lower right corner where it says hatched area greater than 10% probability of significant weather. That's a reminder that that's, what we would call the significant severe district there, because it's more likely to see significant severe weather in that one, and that does include much of the area. And significant severe weather in this case, as far as that's concerned, would be, if we were talking about tornadoes in particular, which is there with this setup, unfortunately. As I kind of switch this over, let's talk about some timing here and how is it in playing out. I'm going to go ahead and give me a moment, which browser windows here for that. There are a bunch of different projections that we could, go with in this situation. I'm going to start with this one here, which is kind of the core of one of our longer range models, but I think does a good job. It's kind of like the longest range, high resolution projection that I can show you. I'm kind of picking things up early Saturday. We do expect we'll have isolated storms Saturday. Let's see if I can zoom this in a little better. Kind of focus in on our area slightly better. Let me make sure that is sharing correctly. There, yeah, it is. Okay, so this time frame here, we would be looking Saturday morning, based on kind of what you're seeing there. So we kind of go through time here. By late morning to early afternoon, there are storms still ongoing for locations back to the west. Those increase in coverage in our area into the afternoon potentially, and there is a huge question as to how many of these individual thunderstorms, moisture coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, that will kind of enhance storms as they move into our area. How many of these discrete storms get going becomes produce tornadoes? That is one of the big questions, because moisture, as we'll look at here in a minute, to a certain extent comes in just in time. So as we kind of talk timing here, this would be about 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Notice it takes until about that time, and I'll try to zoom things in a little bit closer, and we just have to remember for a second here. It might be as close as it's going to let me go. Yeah, I don't think it's going to let me go any closer on that, unfortunately. That's fine. But anyway, so this time period here, we'll just say this is, and so you can definitely see like the one we showed close to Ackerman, some down in central Mississippi. Some big questions as to how many of those get going. This would be, so there are those rotating thunderstorms just ahead of this line, and some indication that they will be rotating for quite a while. Like the ones some of them we were tracking, I think this is going back to probably 8 p.m. And again, timing is relative. Actually, this would be 7 p.m. You can see back there closer to Vicksburg, storms getting going and then continuing for a long period of time and kind of enhancing the rotation. So those individual lead thunderstorms are the most likely to produce severe weather and tornadoes for our area. And so that's the concern as to how many of those are in our area. And we'll look at some of the components to go with this as well. You also have this wobbly line back here, which we call a QLCS, quasi-linear convective system. What does that mean? It's just basically a line of wind and rain that we have extra bits of spin, and there will be some locations along case. And so with that in mind, we have the concern that we will probably have certainly a more significant severe weather threat than we had a couple days ago. just be crystal clear. Likely clearing the area, at least on this particular projection. We show by midnight that might be a little. Some projections are a little later than that. Just now getting to the point here where we can look at some of these higher resolution projections and saying, I'm going to pick this up at, this is 6 p.m. Sunday. And it's like, widen this out. The reason I'm widening this out, I'm going to change models here for a moment. I want you to concentrate on those individual storms in advance as I change this over to the HRRR. So we go to the latest one on that and wait for that to load in. Unfortunately, this is loading in the present model run. We're going to have to at the far. Okay, a moment. So you know those lead storms, but it has a lesser quantity of those. And you kind of catch the transition that happens there. So there are more lead storm particular projection. One of the many factors we're kind of watching on this. So let's look at, see if it will. There we are. I'm going to force it to look at what we'll call thermal dynamics, in particular, the lower level CAPE, which is fuel for thunderstorms, and compare that. And this is, some of the latest data hot off the presses right now. Really greater down south, but for this kind of setup, anytime we're kind of getting really much fuel at all, and we do definitely into our area, that definitely shows us moisture and fuel that's kind of coming up at just the last second there, and possibly a narrow core weather and tornadoes are possible during that evening time period. Frankly, I don't have a whole lot of other projections that go out that far. Right. The one that I have, so we wait for it to load. And this time, but I think it's pretty switch between models there, so that's part of the reason why I'm using this one. Now, it's this particular projection as I think it probably should be. But just a reminder that thankfully there are some projections that aren't quite as bullish on what we're looking at. All that said, let's go back to, let's actually go to here, because that's really another way to kind of show that wedge of unstable air. And there's going to be some place on the leading edge of that unstable air where there's a nose of moist thunderstorms to kind of form more into our area. Before we go there, let's go look at, hold on, this, which is kind of a future projection on this NAM, North American Mesoscale, 3 kilometers, the grid spacing, and so that gives us an idea of how good the resolution is. This particular projection tries to keep it primary. I hope that's the case, but there are wobbly spots in that line, even on this one that, frankly, at this time frame out typically does not show anything super strong. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Right with the forcing right on the line. So I'm not sure that I fully buy that, but again, with the lesser amount of lower moisture, that's what I should expect out of that. Now going back to that original one that was, again, is a little more aggressive. I want to track where it's showing the moisture, the lower level dew points, because I think this does a better job of showing those numbers more in the mid 60s, which is substantially higher. And then an influx. So we'll kind of wait for that to load. The data kind of loading as we speak, of getting mid 60s, maybe farther north. So you have just a little nose of upper 60s to get some of that into the area, and that's one of the many things I think that kind of indicates there's a severe weather threat there that we definitely need to be monitoring very, very closely. So I'm going to kick this. Give me a moment. Back over to the different browser to kind of show the area that we're kind of honing in on. As we just give me a moment here for this to kind of, sorry, I got to switch which browser window we're on there for a moment. Talk about the overall, and then we're not going to make this a super long one tonight just because, let's go ahead and share that one. Give me a moment. So again, that's part of the reason why this is the area that's targeted. The strongest winds aloft are north, as is often the case, and the more impactful closer to the Gulf. So that moisture will be surging northward, and that's the reason why this is our risk area at this point. Going back up to the official kind of overall as my son said today, it looks like an avocado, and I've heard that before, but it definitely does. You have this kind of bullseye, this threes, and these places are targeted. What do we expect? Based on kind of what we've seen this evening, I think the positioning on this is fairly good. It's possible that, again, a greater risk level might be required out of this before we're all said and done. And certainly even tonight, I'm waiting on some other projections, including one of our in-house models here to kind of give us an idea of what it will be. Thinking ahead, this is Saturday, as you saw, after dark, late evening to overnight hours. And that's a situation where we have that, where the likelihood, frankly, getting hurt concerned is the greatest. Because the majority of tornado injuries, fatalities, that happens late at night during the hours. So now, tonight, Thursday night, when we're talking about this, is the time you need to be planning where you're going to end up going if tornadoes form. So that way you're within steps of that tornado safe place, as opposed to, it's my time. Now you have time to kind of make that plan, and it will be probably a very late evening for some folks. So maybe not a bad night to spend the night someplace else if you're in one of those more vulnerable structures. So that's the thinking now. Of course, we'll have updates tonight at 10 o'clock on WTVA 9 News, and probably more Facebook Lives tomorrow. I don't know if we'll do one in the morning necessarily, perhaps, and then certainly probably one in the evening, and then obviously. So be thinking ahead, be preparing, and of course, keep it here for the latest. Real quick, God, I know that there is time now for people to prepare us the option. And God, I pray as we, roll into this with the overnight timing, that you give your people, allow your people to tap into wisdom, and give them ears to hear, eyes to see, and feet to move. Help them to have a way to find out their own warnings, and just, keep us safe. Praise in Jesus' name, amen. To that point, one of the things I was thinking about, you need to make sure you have weather call or code red or the weather app, so that you have more than one way to wake you up if, for whatever reason, you decide to stay home. It's a sturdy enough structure, and you go to bed, you need something to wake you back up or let you know if we need to go to shelter, because we do expect there will be some of that. Fully, make it up here. So there are some positives there that hopefully will work out. But I can't say I necessarily feel super duper guarantees about that at this point. It definitely looks like what we would call a synoptically evident severe weather setup. Very obvious looking at the overall pattern that there's a decent chance of severe weather. And most of what we call the analogs that we look at, I'm not sure if we'll really dig into that. But these long range sort of projections, we can check them against what has happened in the past. And so if what's happened in the past matches what's happening now, we have kind of idea of what that's going to look like. A lot of our projections, our analogs, aren't really lining up the moisture with the same upper level pattern quite the right way. The moisture is a little better than some of them that really lock on to the upper level pattern. So I think that's enough evidence to tell me that there's still a pretty good chance for severe weather. The late night timing makes it dangerous, and we just need to prepare accordingly. All right. So updates on the position at 10 o'clock on WTVA 9 News. We'll have updates more on that tomorrow. Of course, like and subscribe to all the stuff. Matt Lopon on all of this, probably the easiest way to find it. And we'll talk to y'all later. Be safe.